Well, hello, everybody. I'm glad to see you back. I'm in the dark. Ooh, spooky. They'll turn the lights back on. But I'm happy that you guys came back. This is our fourth night that I'm here. My name's Halley, and I need to get it on a slide for you. There we go. My name's Halley. It's the fourth week that I've been here. On Thanksgiving, my family thought it was really funny to see if they could find the videos from the first 3 nights. And they turned it on, and I hadn't seen it yet. So just so you know, it is out there on I wanted to check it because they've been so good about videoing it. So we went on YouTube, the Lutheran Church of Hope YouTube channel. And so my in-laws had heard about it, and they're like, oh, let's pull it up. They pulled it up on the iPad. And then I was so embarrassed. You know how embarrassed you are watching it around other people. And so my face is like super embarrassed looking. And then everybody came over and they're all like surrounding me watching it. And I'm like, oh, it works. That's awesome. And I went to like turn it up. Like, oh, no, let's watch more. And then they're watching. I'm like, oh, that's okay. We can turn it up. It was so embarrassing. And then my daughter's in the back who's grown. And she's like got this picture of everybody standing around, me looking super embarrassed. And they're all standing around. And she, of course, posted on Instagram or something. I'm like, come on, guys. All your kids are grown. You don't need this. But the YouTube channel works, and they were laughing. They were like, oh, you look like you know what you're talking about. I'm like, thanks, I think. But anyway, so it is working if you weren't able to join us for the first 3. So tonight, we're doing the very last one, and it really is kind of a combination of everything. It's kind of like some listening, some following directions, and it's all the stuff that falls into the more category that doesn't really fit into anything. So we're going to be talking about lots of random things, okay? And so let's see what we're getting into. We're going to start with the Bible verse. And so I need your help saying this one. And then I'll explain to you why I like this one so much for this class. All right, so it's from Ecclesiastes 4, verse 9 and 10. So if you'll help me read it out loud. Here we go. 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. And I like this one for a variety of reasons. I like it because I like to think about how God parents us. He's helping us as the helper. And then I like thinking about it like as a parent and a child. That's what we're there for. We're there to help them succeed, help them up. And I also like to think about it if you're in a co-parenting role, if you have 2 parents, how you can help each other through it. Because sometimes you need it in difficult times of parenting. If you're a single parent, you don't always have that other person there to help you. But gosh, if you do, it is very helpful to be able to tag somebody in. Like, okay, I'm out, you're in. That's pretty nice. So that's why I like this one so much. But we're going to think about that. Because we've talked a lot about discipline and foundations and all that stuff, and that can be difficult, but throughout the whole thing of it, what we want to do is we want to help them succeed. We're helping each other up, so that's what we're doing here. All right, but before we get to the next part, I want us to pray. We need to pray in before we start, okay? Dear God, thank you so much for leading us all here, for your wonderful children, for the fact that we get to be parents. There are times that can be trying, and we know that if we look to you, you will help us. You'll help us up, and you'll help us succeed, and you'll help our kids succeed. Be with us throughout the holidays. Show us your love, and help us shower love upon our kids who are your kids. We love you, and in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so tonight, we're going to start with a review, and we've had a bunch of things that we've talked about. This is just a quick review, is that we've talked about the foundations, which were having house rules, having a positive jar, trying to say 10 positives each day, and do daily prayer. So what typically happens is you start out strong, you do those things, and then it kind of peters off, and you might try new things, but that other thing will peter off. So this is your reminder. Go back. Do those things. If you started them, go back. Refresh them up. That's always good to do. So that's where we started. Then we went into discipline, and we talked about 2 kinds of behaviors. One was stop behaviors, and we talked about 1, 2, 3 magic. And then we talked about start behaviors, which really encompass things like routines and chores. So there's things that you want kids to be able to start on their own. And talked about how you can build independence by having clear expectations and using visuals as much as possible, because that's going to help them become more independent. But here's the stuff I always come back to. There are certain things I want you to remember about this. So we're going to see if you remember it. If behavior goes south, you should increase the positives. Hey, that was back from week 1. You guys remember? That's awesome. Okay, and then in 1, 2, 3 magic, there were 2 key things. No talking and no emotion. Those are the 2 hardest ones. That's why I keep coming back to it. It is really hard not to talk too much. So that's important to remember. And then this last week, if you're reminding a lot, this is kind of a tricky one. You should create a what? Do you remember what you should create? Some kind of visual, okay? Like a chart or something like that. So you want to create a visual that your child can use. So if you tend to be the reminder, you're the one that's reminding, you want to create something else that can become the reminder. That's why you want to create those visuals, so that it's not all on you anymore. It's now building their independence to look at the visual, which is now the reminder. So that one's kind of tricky. If you're reminding a lot, you should create a visual. So that's kind of where we've been. So now you've got sort of those basics down. So now we're going to think a little bit deeper and broader, okay? So within those topics, I kind of hit them very broadly. I gave them like the big information. There's a few things in there that we're going to add a little depth to some of the stuff that we already know, some of the stuff that we've talked about already. We're going to have some time for questions. So if you've tried some of these things, I want to hear about what you've tried. I want to hear about stuff that worked well. And I want to hear about stuff that did not work so well, and the questions that you might have around them. And so we're going to have time for doing that tonight. And then we're going to talk about tips and tricks. That's sort of like the stuff that doesn't fall into any category. It's just like a big bucket of tips and tricks that will help your life be a lot easier. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So the first things we're going to talk about is some things that with stop behaviors. So remember when we talked about stop behaviors, we were talking about using 1, 2, 3 magic. And a stop behavior is just anything you want to stop, anything at all. And so in 1, 2, 3 magic, do you remember the process that you do? If they're doing something that you want them to stop, whether that be whining or having a temper tantrum or talking back or any of those things, first thing you're going to do is you're just going to look at them and say, that's 1. You're going to wait 5 seconds. No talking, no motion. If they're still doing it, you'll say, that's 2. You wait 5 seconds. And then you'll say, that's 3 if they don't stop. And then they'll go to timeout for the number of minutes they are per age. So that's what 1, 2, 3 magic is. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about adding another component onto that, which is empathy. So 1, 2, 3 magic, like I said, is just a program that sort of takes all the processes of successful discipline and just puts it into a simple way of thinking about it. So 1, 2, 3, and then you have a timeout. But there's other things that also work really well and that also train the brain in a nice way. And so they talk about empathy a lot in Love and Logic and in other things that you will read about behavior. And so I kind of want to marry the two together. Okay, so if you're going to go on the 1, 2, 3 Magic website, it won't talk about this piece, but I'm just marrying 2 different pieces together, and they go together really well. Okay, so we're going to talk about adding empathy to that and why that's important. So I'm going to have us watch a quick video about that, and then we'll talk a little bit more.
Is that we always lock in that strong dose of empathy or sadness for the kid before we deliver the bad news. Lock in that empathy, then the consequence. Lock in that empathy, then ask the kid, what do you think you're going to do, right? So when that little kid came off the playground and said, somebody lost my coat, oh, that teacher was thinking, yes, I get a chance to use my new skills. And she said, oh, no, that's horrible. You got to feel horrible about that. He was shocked. He'd never had anybody do that. He looked at her. What? And then she asked, what do you think you're going to do? And his response, of course, was, I'm doing something. I'm telling. And she said, oh, would you like some ideas? What? Some kids decide to go out and look. No, I already looked for it. It's not out there. Somebody stole it. Oh, no. Well, some kids decide that they're going to go down to the oh, I already talked to her. She doesn't care. Secretary's just mean. Well, some kids decide that they're going to talk to the janitor. He won't be able to help me. Well, and this was hard for her. Good luck. Isn't that hard to do with kids? And what's the message when you say good luck? It is your problem to solve. And by the way, what's the other message? You're capable. You can do this. What was she experimenting with? Love and Logic teaches 5 steps for helping kids own and solve their problems.
So I like that one because it's talking sort of about building independence and empathy. And there's a lot that goes along with empathetic statements. And they did a bunch of research on kids in different, various ages and looked at the way that kids respond to getting basically the same discipline in 2 different fashions. One is if something bad has happened, maybe they've made a poor choice of some kind. And the one way that they are given discipline is sort of just a no-nonsense, you did this, you're going to have this consequence. That's what's going to happen. And then basically they did the same thing, but all they did is they added an empathetic statement right before it. So it's the same no-nonsense thing. You did this, you're going to have this. But before they said you did this, they said, boy, I bet that's really bumming you out. I'm sorry this happened. Okay, but you did this, so now this is going to happen. So all they did was add this empathetic statement at first, like, man, that's hard. Like, I'm sorry you made that choice. Where they weren't just faking it and being like, oh, it's tough. Not like that. They actually were sort of empathetic, like, I'm sad that you're in this situation, really that you put yourself in, but I'm sad that you're going to have to deal with what's coming next, basically. So they had that empathetic statement, they waited a beat, and then they delivered what is going to be the consequence for it. And what they found is for all ages, so it wasn't difference between a teenager and a young child, but for all of them, what they found was that if it was delivered in just the fair manner of you did this and this happens, they would blame the adult that was disciplining them. Whoever the adult was, it was like they were mad at that person. That person is making their life miserable, basically. But if they did it in the other way, where they just had that one, like you're connecting with them, like, this is tough kind of situation, they just wait a second, and then they delivered the exact same message. The kids felt like they had like a friend in it. And that, yeah, they were going to have this happen. But they took it on more of the responsibility for themselves. But they saw that adult, whoever that adult was that was dishing it out, whether it be a parent or like a coach or a teacher, they felt more like, we're friends in this, but yeah, this stinks kind of thing. It's sort of my thing I have to deal with. So all that was different between that was the empathetic response. And I thought that was really cool. And they've redone that study a number of times. So I like that for all ages. So we're going to talk about adding empathy, the empathy statement to both 1, 2, 3 magic, where it's the one that counts and then time out. We're also going to talk about it with solving your own problems, which is kind of what they were talking about here. So with the empathy, I'm trying to see what my next slide is. See what I have? Oh, there we go. Okay. So what does it look like for 1, 2, 3 magic? So all I want you to do is I want you to add one empathetic response. Now, the thing about in Love and Logic, they talk a lot about what is your empathetic response. It should be something super easy and short. You do not want to say it a lot. But what you want to say is you want it to be something that is very natural for you. So what I like to think of is like if I was with a friend, like a group of friends, and something happens to them that is no fun. Like let's say, they got into a fender bender or, something was broken that they really liked. Like what do you typically say for your friend? Like me, I typically say like, shoot or bummer, or those are typically the two things that I say just personally. Everybody usually has something that they say. So think about if your friend said, oh man, this just happened to me, what would your response be? Usually it's like a 1 or 2 word thing that you say that, oh man, that stinks. Or whatever that statement is, I want you to kind of think of that in your head because that's a natural response. And then what you want to do is you want to use that statement over and over and over again when you're talking to your kids. Because you don't want to vary it up too much because you want to lock in that empathetic statement. So it sounds funny. You think like, oh, doesn't that start to sound contrived? Well, no, it actually sounds like you because you're going to pick something that sounds like you. But it also helps them to understand that as soon as you say that statement, it will kick them into a different frame of mind, like oh, they're with me, and oh boy, I'm going to have to deal with something. So it's a double-edged thing. It's like, oh, now I'm going to have to do something about that. So it's good to have one statement that you use. So kind of play around with it. Think of what your statement might be. So it would sound like this. So you would say, that's 1. Wait 5 seconds. That's 2. Wait 5 seconds. That's 3. Before you say time out, you say that's 3, and you say, shoot, time out. That's all it sounds like. You just take 1 minute to be like, I'm sorry, you're going to have to handle that, but time out. So that's all it sounds like in 1, 2, 3. Because remember, you're not supposed to use a whole lot of words. You're not supposed to use a whole lot of, emotion. So that's all it's going to sound like. Or for me, I used bummer a lot. It'd be like, bummer, time out, kind of thing. You have to be careful not to use emotion because sometimes our emotions are like, oh, you're on my last nerve. And you might be like, bummer, time out. Don't do that. You actually have to be able to sort of be able to feel a little badly about, yes, they are going to have a timeout, and you feel bad they're going to have it. So you want to have the right feeling behind it. So be sort of calm about it and say bummer. So that's the only thing I want you to add, but it really will have a different effect on your child going into the timeout. So that's all it is. The 1, the 2, the 3, bummer, timeout. So that's all it is, okay? Pick your word that you're going to slip in there that works for you, and then go do timeout. Now, what does it look like for start behaviors? And so that was a little bit more about what he was talking about. So when there are problems of ways they're going to have to start things or they're going to have to solve their own problems, like the kid lost the coat, what we tend to do, because we are parents and we are used to solving problems, they tend to come to us with a problem and we think we need to solve it, give them the answer. Well, a lot of times they don't want the answer that we give them, or we give them the answer and they argue back about the answer that we gave them. What we should be doing is we should be training them to be successful people and training them how to solve their own problems, which is hard to do. So basically, it's kind of handing the problem back. But I love about Love and Logic is that basically they do that, but they do that with empathy. So kind of like he talked about in the thing, lost the coat. He was like, oh, man, that really stinks. Shoot. Okay. Well, what are you going to do? What's your plan? I love that word with kids. What's your plan? How are you going to solve that? And once you start saying that back to them, rather than just say, what are you going to do? Sometimes if you say, what are you going to do, and you end it there, usually what they'll say is, I don't know. That's their typical response to what are you going to do. But when you phrase it as something like, what's your plan? Well, how are you going to solve that? They start actually thinking like, wow, what am I going to do to solve that? And at first, they are going to be flummoxed because typically their parents don't respond like that. They give them answers or they solve it for them. And then I love it that they always give suggestions. They don't tell them what to do. They don't give them advice. They'll say, well, some kids might want to try this and some kids might want to try that. You always want to give at least 2 ideas. Don't only give 1. Try to give 2. You might give 3. And then you can say, what do you think you might want to try? They might say something, and then you say, well, and if they say, well, I don't know, be like, well, give it something a shot, and then let me know how that goes. And then walk away. And that is really hard because you're like, well, what if they don't solve it? I need to help them solve it. But you can also tell them, hey, if you want to come up with some ideas and then talk to me about it, that's fine. Or go try some things, and then if you need some help, come find me and we could talk about it. But don't set it up like you need some help and then come to me and then I'll fix it for you, because that's probably what they want to have happen. But the more times you can do that, to just give suggestions and have them come up with their own decision, it actually does a couple things. It helps them to become problem solvers automatically, so they aren't going to be they're going to figure it out that you're going to ask them to solve problems, and they're going to start solving problems on their own, which is great. How awesome is that? But the other part of that is that it helps them to think about you as more of someone that they can come to for advice. And when they are having a problem, because down the road, that's what we want. As they get bigger and they have bigger problems and more complicated things, we want them to come to us. And they know that we're not just going to solve stuff or just give them advice, that we're going to listen, give them ideas, and then we're going to listen to what they have to say. And that is a huge thing to get them ready for those teenage years. So it does a couple things, this part. But remember, you want to start that with that empathy statement. The first thing is, can I relate to you? Oh, that stinks. Darn. Okay, well, what are your thoughts? Those open-ended thoughts, and then it really gets them like, oh, geez, I'm supposed to have thoughts? Kind of thing. And wait time is awesome. We usually like to say, oh, what are your thoughts? And if they don't answer in like 2 seconds, we're like, what about this? What about that? What about that? Wait. Give them some time. And then really let them go off and try it. So that's hard to do, but that's important. It helps build those thinking skills, those reasoning skills, helps them to know that they're capable of doing this. You have confidence that they can solve problems, because it really does make them feel like if you solve problems for them all the time, they really start to feel like you don't think they can do it on their own. Kind of like when we talked about doing routines. Like if you're going to follow them and redo the chore that they did, it makes them feel like they can't do it, like you're correcting them. It's the same thing. If you're solving stuff for them, it makes them feel like they're not capable, or why even try, basically. They're going to do it themselves anyway. Why even try? And that's not what we want them to feel like. So that it does add a lot of things. So that's the one thing I want you to add in. For stop behaviors, add in that little quick empathetic statement before you have them go to timeout. And then on some of those problems that they come to you for, things that are maybe not even that you're trying to set up like a routine for, but they're really just trying to solve something, try this with them and see what happens. And at first they're going to be like, this is new. What's going on here? But the more you do it, the better it will feel, and the more that they'll start doing these. You'll be surprised, because a lot of kids have to do this at school. But what happens is they learn that they have to do it at school, so they do it at school. And then they come home, and they don't have to do it at home, so they don't do it at home. They just come to you and they get it solved. And then when you start asking them, well, what's your plan? A lot of times they'll be like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to flip into plan mode because I do that at school. A lot of times they can get it done, but they just haven't done it at home because they haven't been asked to do it at home. So you might be surprised, if your kids are of school age, how much they actually have some capability at doing this, and they just haven't been practicing it at home yet. So give that a shot. And I do want to say they actually practice that even in preschool. So if you have a preschooler that's in preschool, usually it's the 4-year-old class, they start doing that, and so you'd be surprised even with your 4-year-olds. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Well, maybe I'll go back and forth. Oh, sibling rivalry, awesome. Let's watch this.
Sibling rivalry, we have 3 rules for sibling rivalry, okay? When the kids are fighting, and we're talking about stop behavior. Kids are fighting. Rule number 1 is count both children. Okay? Hold them equally responsible unless one is the obvious unprovoked aggressor and you are totally positive. But be very careful, because you know kids are tricky. Sometimes you can be, you've been there, you're in the same room with them and you can't tell who started it. There are also some children who are tricky. would you understand what I'm saying if I told you that there are some kids who can start a fight by giving their sibling a hug? Is that understandable? Yes. How do they do that? I know perfectly well you hate hugs, and I'm going to look like the loving one, and I'm going to get to make you look stupid and dig it in by giving you what looks like a affectionate hug. No way, it's affectionate. Kids are tricky. Kids are tricky. So, rule number 1. Count both of them unless one's the obvious unprovoked aggressor. Rule number 2, unless someone is bleeding or you think someone is physically injured, never ask the world's stupidest question. Who started it? Yeah, who said it? Or what happened? He did, she did, he did, she did, as you were saying. Third thing is never expect an older child to be more mature during a fight than a younger child. I don't care if they're 11 and 5. Don't say to that 11-year-old, can't you put up a little teasing? She's only a baby. What'd you do if you say that? You loaded the gun of the 5-year-old. Okay? And they'll use it to maximum advantage.
So we kind of talked about sibling rivalry when we talked about 1, 2, 3 magic. That's usually the question that I get is how do I do it with siblings? And those were some of the key points. The biggest thing that he talks about is, even like, let's say you're upstairs, they're downstairs, you hear it happening, or somebody runs upstairs and says, so-and-so, blah, whatever it is. I don't ask any questions. I just say, both of you, that's one. And I continue on with what I'm doing. And they might argue with you, especially if one's coming to you and say, but blah, 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 blah. I would look at that one then and say, that's 2. Because now they're arguing with you. But what happens then, what will happen over time, is that as they figure out that if they get into it with one another, you're going to count them both, no matter what. You're going to count them both. What's going to happen over time is that they're going to figure out that this doesn't get us anywhere. We've got either I need to figure out how to get out of a situation that is not good. So they're going to figure out how to disengage from a problem situation, or they're going to figure out how can I make this work? And so a lot of times it actually builds great negotiation skills. People can figure out ways to problem solve through situations. I see a lot of older kids learning how to deal with younger kids by figuring out how to like distract, be like, oh, but look, you can have this train instead. You could play with this one, which actually is a really good skill to learn for like dealing with younger kids, is that whole distraction, give them something else so you can keep the thing that you wanted. So it's building really good skills, but it takes practice of you not solving the problem and coming in and just putting away the things or saying like, cut that out. You play over there and you play over there and just count it. That's 1 for both of you, or 3 of you, or 4 of you, or however many are involved. And then if somebody is an ongoing arguer, then you count that person a little more. Now, let's say they are in a physical brawl. Or one, they're sort of wailing on each other. You don't know what happened, but they're all into it with one another. Of course, that's an immediate timeout because they're hurting one another. Even if it's, a lot of times they'll say, we're just wrestling. I got that all the time. Oh, I'm sorry, that's 3. Darn. All right, but the thing is that, so if, let's say they're timing out and the kids share a room, okay? Do not send kids that are in fisticuffs or have been timed out to the same room. Do not send them up to together, because we'll just continue on in the room. So you just want to make, so let's say you normally have them time out in their room, but they share the room. So just say, Johnny, you can go to your room, and Sarah, you can go to my bedroom, whatever it is for this timeout. If it's 4 of them, you go on the couch, you go there, and you sit right here by me. Whatever it is. So you just get them to separate locations for the timeout, and when the timeout's done, you act like it never happened, you send them along their merry way. If 2 of them get into it again, you count them again. Like I said, if it's physical fighting, that's an automatic timeout, otherwise I just count it. You will usually find that you'll have some kids that will learn how, like, it's not worth it to me, I'm going to disengage from this situation. Other kids might persist with it, and it's just personality. It's kind of all it is. Those are usually your kids. You usually have one kid that will go to 1 and then be done. You'll have one that goes to 2 and then will be done. Or you have one that takes you all the way to 3 a few times, just randomly to see, is it still going to be a timeout? So different kids have different personalities with that. So that was sibling rivalry, because we just sort of touched on it a little bit, and I know that is typically one that comes up. So I just wanted to touch on that one a little bit. All right, so that just sort of talks about it again. And like he talked about, don't ask questions. That's our immediate response. What happened? Who started it? What's going on? Just remember, quiet, no talking. That's one. And they need to learn to just cut it out and then move on. All right, so I just wanted to touch on that real fast. And I think we might. Is it another video? The next one? No? If you could put it forward for me. I don't know why my clicker's not going. Oh, well, maybe I did it. All right, I'll go back now. Huh? There we go. Okay. All right, so now we're going to have time for questions. Okay? We can stay here however long you want. If no one says anything, we don't have to stay here at all. It's totally up to you guys. So this is questions about any of this stuff. With the foundations and the positives, with the stop, 1, 2, 3 magic, with the start routines and chores, and just general stuff that even we haven't talked about. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about? Things that they tried that worked or doesn't work or have questions? It always takes one brave soul to start it. No? Did you have one? What's your question? They're talking you into it? That's good. Takes the first brave soul.
The 1, 2, 3 magic has worked well. So my daughter's 6. She's the only one, but she'll push it to 2 quite a bit.
Yeah.
Figure out what's going on. Why did you say 1? And she'll just kind of keep going.
Right.
But we haven't had a timeout in the last couple of weeks.
Wow.
That's awesome. So that's really positive.
That's fantastic.
But it's one of those things where sometimes I feel like, is this worth even counting about? Is it that big of a deal? Sometimes it's not. It's just kids being kids, and it's just going to go and pass and so on. And then other times when it's like, okay, I got to remain calm and just do all the things that I coach her to do as a kid, and do that myself as well too. So that's been good.
That's good. So he was just talking about how the 1, 2, 3 magic is working for him. And kids, like I said, kids do sometimes go to 2, usually, or do 1. Yeah. And she did get to 3. And a lot of times they do. They have to get to 3 to figure it out, like what's happening. And one thing I do want to tell you about is, and I don't know if your parents said this, but my parents always said it, like the kids go through phases. Have you heard of that? They go through phases or their cycles. It's very true. And so what will happen with your kids is, especially under the age of about 6 or 7, as kids grow and change and their mind grows and changes, you'll get it under control. And you'll have a time where you're really not going to time out, hardly at all. And you'll get to a place where you're feeling like, yeah, I really don't have to count much anymore. And then all of a sudden, they'll start doing something completely new that they've never done before, never tried before, or they try things that they have not done in a really long time. You'll be like, what is going on? And just remember to go back and count it. Usually what that means is they've had all of a sudden a big brain development stage. They're learning how to manipulate through things and problem solve things, so they're thinking differently. And so now they want to see, ooh, what about this? What if I do this? Does this count? Does that count? So just, if it comes back around in a cycle, that's normal. Just start back with your counting. Even if it's something you've never seen before, you'll be like, what is going on now? Just count it, and it'll be okay. They just need to know where the line is, where the boundary is. So that's what you're helping them to understand. Okay, all right, we've got one in the back.
That's exactly what happened with Lydia. We've been counting for a while with her.
Yeah?
And she got to a place where, for her, she decided she wasn't going to stay in timeout.
Yeah.
So she's like, yeah, you can get to 3, that's okay. I'll just go to timeout for like 30 seconds and then come out. And so that was kind of, we're like, okay, now what? We started the timer over, but there was one night where she came out of timeout like 5 times. We're like, okay. It ended up being a 45-minute timeout.
Yeah. I know, and you're like, you haven't done this since the beginning of timeout. So I just had a parent who said that exact thing. Her child they started this when she was like 3, and she's been doing great. And she's 4.5 now, and all of a sudden, she did the exact thing. She starts coming out of timeout all the time. And I was like, well, you have to treat it just like at the beginning, where you just keep taking them back in without saying anything. Because it's hard when they get older, and you know that they know it. You want to be like, what is going on? Like, you want to talk to them while don't say a word. Yeah, really. You want to be like, you know this, but try not to say anything. Just lead them back and then walk out. They might follow you back out, lead them back in, and they will quickly get back into the swing of things. But they do that, and that's normal. So it's okay that happens. I just like to tell parents that means they're getting smarter. That is frustrating, but it means like they're getting smarter. So it's a good thing, but that is normal. So just go back to your counting, and it should all shape up in that. Okay, what else? Yeah, you have a question.
It's not really a question. It's something that I think was probably a pretty powerful point that you made.
Good.
So my kids are a little bit older, but I did do the whole 1, 2, 3, not this exact way.
Yeah.
I talked too much in high school. But I kind of abandoned that, and then I found myself really trying to explain everything to them. And so I think at one point you said, you don't need to tell them. They know what's wrong.
Yeah.
And so I felt like the more I talked, the less they engage and recognize their own behavior. So I've just literally gone back to, that's the one.
Yes.
And then they just get up and go pick up their dirty clothes. And I'm like, what?
I know.
I spent years arguing about why you gotta pick up your clothes and do your chores. And I just started counting. Didn't even go over
No.
the routines.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to get 2 or 3 because now they're old enough.
Right.
They know.
Oh, yeah.
And I saved myself so much breath, so many arguments.
It does, and it frees you up. Like, it makes you, because those arguments, when you're having to give them reasons over and over again, it wears you out and it stresses you out. And then, but they're so smart as they get older. Every reason you give them, then they have another argument for. Then you give them a reason, then they have an argument, then a reason and an argument. You end up spending so much time on something that is like, really, that would have taken you 2 seconds to pick up. What is happening? So that is very powerful. Just one just means, just not spend any time on it.
With my 7th grader, I'm like,
Oh, yeah, that's one.
he's like, okay.
Right. Yeah.
I have to get to 2. And I'm like,
No.
this should not be this easy.
And so you just have to go back and reuse that stuff. But you're right. It basically just lets them know, here's my boundary. We're not discussing it. That's one. And I love that. I love that you went back to it. So that's good. Very good.
You could have seen how long. It always morphed into something it didn't even start with.
Always.
They're walking back. Then it was about, next thing you know, the sock's still on the floor, and he's in the room crying, and I'm ready for bed.
Oh, yeah.
Really avoid that.
Yeah. You're ready for your own timeout. Yeah. That's good. I'm so glad that worked for you. That's awesome. Anybody else have a question or something they want to bring up? Okay.
I think one of the other things that you mentioned today that we kind of hit on before is the framing with empathy and asking them to problem solve. I really feel like that's kind of the best way we can empower our kids to know that
Yeah.
this is something that you can handle. You can totally do this, even though they're freaking out about it, whatever else, and you just kind of like,
Yeah.
man, that must be rough.
Right. And I have faith in you. You can do this. And I think that is huge. Just letting them know in those little ways that you believe in them, you can totally do this. Sometimes they do need suggestions because they might not have any idea where to go, but that's okay. And then they'll figure it out and they'll try stuff and it won't work and they'll learn from that and that's all good. Yeah.
I have a question. So I have one who is really, really slow.
Uh-huh.
So I started getting him up earlier.
Yep.
To allow him more time for his routine.
Mm-hmm.
He's got his routine down pretty well. So usually
Good.
when my boys are eating breakfast, I go back upstairs and I finish getting ready.
Uh-huh.
And I set a timer on the microwave. When the timer beeps, you need to start getting your shoes on. And it still allows them a good 10 minutes to get their shoes, their coats, backpacks. We pack everything
Yeah.
the night before and sit it on the table. But still, I feel like he's still running out of the door to get to the bus stop.
Mm.
And I feel like still towards the end of it, I'm the one that's like, okay, do you have your snack? Do you have it?
Right.
So I didn't send him to school with his gloves the other day. I said, make sure you have everything, check all your stuff.
Yeah.
And he left and he went to school and he didn't have any gloves. And I thought, oh, shoot, your hands are going to be really cold today.
Yeah. Good thing you have pockets, honey. Good thing.
So what do I do since I've already got him up earlier?
Right.
And
Right.
Like we have to do our whole routine and then
Yep.
we go down because then if they don't eat all their breakfast, like
Yeah. Oh, well. I think, are they doing any playing between eating and then getting out the door?
no, not really.
Not really.
No, he'll just sit there and I don't know.
He's just slow. And he might be a slow waker. He might just be a difficult morning person. Yeah. Oh, always. It's just his personality. Yeah. You know, I think, and how old did you say he is? He's 8. And so maybe what you might want to do first is talk to him about it and say, hey, this is what's happening. You're not getting out yet, and we got up earlier. What do you think? You could use, like what we talked about today. How do you think we should solve this problem? See what he says. He might come up with an idea, and if he comes up with an idea, try it. If it's something that makes sense, try it, because it also makes kids feel empowered. Like, I came up with this, so they have buy-in if they came up with it. Give it a shot. If it doesn't work, you can always say, oh, great, okay, we'll try that one day and see if it works, and come back and talk about it later, see if you think it worked. Make sure you have your expectation. I expect you to have all these things on when you leave the house. I love it that you didn't rescue him. You didn't take the gloves to school, which was great. He has pockets. He'll be good. And he'll learn from that. But I think, I would ask him, and then if he can't come up with ideas, then I would say, I think a suggestion would be that either that he gets it sounds weird, but he gets everything on before he starts to eat. Or, honestly, where he's wearing everything and his backpack before he starts to eat, shoes on, the whole shebang. He doesn't have to wear his gloves, of course. That'd be funny, eating breakfast with gloves on. We wouldn't have to have those on. Those could be in his pockets, because then usually kids are fairly motivated to eat, or they can take it with them. You start having things that he could take with him as he's running out the door. Or you could say that, here's a couple of suggestions. If you already have suggestions, we put everything on before we start to eat, or you could get up another 15 minutes early and see if that helps. And if you start getting to a place where we feel like, oh, you've got this, then we could push it back more, the time more. He just might be someone that just needs, you have to keep pushing it and pushing it. We hate to do that because that means we have to get up, or we have to get started even earlier, but some kids just need it. It used to drive me crazy that my sister would get up so early for high school. Oh my gosh, she got up so early. And I was like, are you kidding me? She still to this day takes forever to get ready in the morning. I think it's just her. And I think some people are just slower at getting moving than others, but I think that might be him. Give it a shot.
Missed the bus a couple times.
Yeah.
Because I can take my kids to school and
Yeah.
I enjoy taking them, but I'm not cool with anymore. I'd rather ride the bus. So I'm always like, oh shoot, looks like the bus is gonna be here in 2 minutes, so
Yeah.
I can either hustle it up or I'll just take this.
Yeah.
But see, then I'm giving the suggestion, right?
Right. And I would plan for it. So that's a great thing to happen like at the moment, because they're not but then I would be proactive and be like, well, since we didn't get it today, that means we're going to have to come up with a way to solve this problem for tomorrow. And then you would figure out whatever that solution is to try. Yeah. What are you going to say? Yeah?
With visuals, like child
Yeah.
mind who is a space case and doesn't pay any attention. These are the things that need to get done. This is what we're leaving. I really hope you have them done. If not, we go to school as we are. God bless you.
Yeah. And I love you, and you will have a great day. And it's okay. So sometimes, kids are running out the door. They don't have their coat on. They're dragging their coat. Stuff's falling out of the pockets. They're throwing their backpack on. Stuff's flying out. It's hard as a parent to see that happening, and they haven't eaten breakfast. But it's okay to let them go, and stuff's flying out, and their mittens are on the driveway. It's okay to let them go, get on the bus, and have to deal with that for a day, and then come back and talk about it and be like, gosh, that looked kind of like a crazy train running out of the door this morning. What are we going to do about that tomorrow? Because that did not seem like it worked well. And see what they think. But sometimes you got to let them do it. Yeah. But I think all those are great ideas. I love that.
What about consequences in the evening when things go so poorly in the morning? I don't know if that's a good idea. I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always wondered, is this too far removed from the situation? But
Yeah, and you know what? And you can. Usually I think my consequence is usually that you have to plan for the next day. We have to spend time discussing it. And if we have to spend enough time discussing it, I also love the generic consequence in Love and Logic is if I have to spend my time and energy worrying about you, spending time worrying about you, helping you, what are you going to do to pay me back for all that time and energy that I've just spent? You are now going to have to pay me back for that. How are you going to pay me back for that? So now we've just spent 45 minutes of my evening trying to plan for the fact that you were really slow this morning. So now you're going to have to fill me back up for 45 minutes. What are you going to do to fill up that 45 minutes of my time? Still, they have to make a discussion. Here's some ideas. You could do my chores. You could wash my dishes. You could dust the house. You know what? I really like to sit with my feet up and watch TV so I could watch my shows and put my feet up. I'm happy to lift them up so you can vacuum. I'll lift them up as you go by, kind of thing. So any of those things I love that generic consequence as well. If it's taking your time and energy. Yeah, go ahead.
So my son, he used to get about a 15-20-minute timeout. He's 8.
Okay.
And so he really thinks he's winning with the 8-minute timeout.
Yeah.
He has no problem with it.
That's okay.
Do I just keep?
Yep, keep doing it. Because the whole idea of a timeout is not that it's not punishment. It's not like they don't have to hate timeout, which I think a lot of us, because some kids will go and they will, as they're in timeout, they will say things like, I like timeout. This is fun. I'm so glad mom put me in here, because they're trying to rile you up. Or they'll be like going to timeout and they'll smile like, I like it when you send me. Those kinds of things, because it gets to us because we feel like they should not be liking this. It's really not about a punishment. What it is it's really training them you're getting them out of the situation of where they should be stopping. They're taking some time by themselves away from something that they should be stopping. They should be calming down, and then it's like a restart. We're starting over, we're going to start fresh, and it should be better. If it's not better, I'm going to count you again, and you get to go back. The reason why you only want it to be short is that actually the more frequent timeouts has a better response for getting a change in behavior if it's more frequent than if it's long in duration. Does that make sense? So the sending back is actually more powerful than just staying in there for a long period of time. So if you have to send them back, that makes a bigger difference to them. And if they're okay with it, honestly, I am okay if they are in their room. If they're being a little pain, I am totally okay with them being in their room. And you know what? I'm actually all right. Some kids, when they're calming down and they're angry or they're dealing with stuff, sometimes just being in your room by yourself and like paging through a book, they kind of actually do kind of enjoy it sometimes. And I think that's okay. Getting that feeling of calm, that's all right. So don't let it is hard because you want him to not like it. But stick to the 8 minutes. And if he comes out and if he says something that's kind of snarky, don't say anything unless it's really directed at you, and then count it. If it's something that's not a nice thing to say, just count it. Go on your way. But you're right. That is something that bothers us to the core sometimes. But think about it in a different way. All right, any other questions or roadblocks as you've been trying things? Yeah.
I'm thinking with my 2.5 and 4-year-old, if we start behaviors but they don't really fall into the routine or chore category, I don't know how to get them doing those things.
Right. Well, so, and I didn't talk about it today, but there is, have you been here? I have a Pinterest page, and I think I put that up. But on there, the thing I love is they have chores by age. So if you go on there, you can look at an age and come up with different chores that might be appropriate for their age. So I think having a chore for their age is a great thing. It empowers them. It might not be super. Their job might not be stellar, but they will feel like they're doing something good. But I think that's a way to get them started in having the visuals out for what they're supposed to do. Helps them. It could be something simple, though. Like, I think we saw some of them that they were like just a picture clip, like pick up stuffed animals, and it went from, to do to like the done pile. So it might be something simple like that. because usually at night, if you have kids of that age, you're the one picking up all the stuff after they go to bed. So why not let that be a part of their chore at night, is to put everything away, or at least a portion of it. So that might be a way to get it started, but you might need some visuals. Because at first you're going to have to show them what to do, but then you want to build in that independence. Oh, it's time to do our nightly chores. Go check your chart. So they learn to go over and start looking. And if you start them young, how awesome, because then hopefully it'll just become part of their life. That's cool. And then they all move away like my kids, and now I have to do it all. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, I think I'm gonna, if more questions come up, raise your hand, because we can dig into them. I'm gonna quick do some tips and tricks. All right, this is one that I think is funny, because they actually have a thing now. They actually sell multiple ones of this. So if you have younger kids, I always had a spot on the car where the kids had to put a hand on the car. Because like I said, I often had like 5 kids in my house at once. So getting kids out of car seats and out of cars in parking lots, and I had very rambunctious kids, I needed to make sure they were all safe. So our job and our rule was, when you got out of the car, you had to put your hand on the spot. There was a spot that, we didn't have a fancy spot, like you can actually get a magnet for your car that's like a handprint or something where they actually put their hand. We did not have that. They just had to put their hand on a spot that I told them that's where they had to put their hand. And they had to be touching the car until I came around to get them. And then we would, get a slow-moving train through the parking lot, or that was the hope it wasn't too fast moving through the parking lot. But I think this is huge. So if you train them, because otherwise a lot of times we just think they know to stick around, and their sense of space is very poor. So even up into like 7 and 8-year-olds, their sense of knowing their surroundings, not great. So they might think that they're close to the car, but there's somebody pulling out next to you, and they don't get that, and they're kind of in that space. I mean, that's like terrifying when you're like, wow, the wheel's going to go over your foot, kind of thing. So teaching them what is their job when they get out of the car. Your job is to put your hand here. The other one is in the yard. If you live in a neighborhood where if they have balls and they might go into the street, or if there's cars going around, if they tend to play. We had, if there was a car, they would sometimes go in we're on a cul-de-sac, they would go in the cul-de-sac and play, but if there was a car, somebody would say car, and they had a place they were supposed to go. They all had to get to the grass. That was their thing. If there was a car, somebody would yell car, and they all had to get on the grass. So if you have a place in your yard that if there's a car, they know they have to get to, that's just another thing to teach them, so that later on in life they know that, oh, when I see that, I need to go to this location. So just a simple thing to teach, and it just helps. Because then you're like, go to your spot, get on the grass, those kinds of things. But if you teach it, then they can do it. So that's a simple thing. Okay, a couple other things. How to gain attention. If you have a lot of kids in your house, these are some things that I've learned from, especially from teachers, because remember, they have to control like 28 kids. So I learned from them. If they have, I would have like a gain attention something. So you can do things that like a teachers do. You could be like, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, so that when you get to 1, they're supposed to all look at you. This is something you have to teach them. In my house, we had a family cheer. It sounds silly, but that's what we did. We were like Team Halley. That's what we were. So I'd say team, they'd say Halley, and they knew that when I said team, they had to say Halley, and they had to look at me. If they didn't do it, I'd do it again. Team, Halley, and they'd look at me, and if somebody wasn't looking at me, I'd say the kid's name. And they had to look at me. And then, because I wouldn't give my direction till they were all looking at me, because otherwise I'm wasting my breath. I'm saying it 5 different times, and then they weren't even listening. And why waste your breath? Get their attention on you before you give a direction. So that's just different ways you can do it. You can do freeze, like 1, 2, 3, freeze, and they're supposed to freeze. Or I have, little kids are supposed to put their hands on their head. Or you could do whatever you want to do. Clap. Teachers have that funny clap, like, and then they do the same clap, or whatever it is. You could do that kind of thing. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me is something that teachers use a lot, and they're supposed to quick put their eyes on you. And that's how I can tell if somebody has a direction. If they're not looking at me, I will not begin talking to them. So if they're kind of turned toward me, but they're looking over here, I'd be like, give me your eyes. I know that sounds silly, but I'll say, give me your eyes, because I want your eyes on me. Now I know you're actually focused. Because especially if there's a screen anywhere in the room, they're like turned toward you, but their eyes are on the screen. So I know they're not listening. So that's just a way to gain attention, so don't waste your breath unless you have their eyes on you. Yeah?
A lot of times we call them focus anchors. But
There you go.
So when we use that, a lot of times I'll say please at the end, but is it better to finish with eyes than it is to finish with please?
Either one is great. I mean, please is always polite because you want to model politeness for your kids. So please is awesome. But if they're not looking or something, I always make sure that I get their eyes. And I would even just say eyes. And they would just learn that, oh, that means I need to look at you. Sometimes I would even do this. And then they're like, oh, okay, look. And then I would tell them whatever it is they're supposed to be listening to. Conversation helpers. We often ask a lot of questions that we don't get a lot of responses to from our kids. You know, they come home, how's your day? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. Who'd you play with? I don't know. What was your favorite thing about today? I don't know. So we get those kinds of answers. So having different kinds of conversation helpers is nice. And so we started doing a lot of different things and investigating different ways to ask open-ended questions. And as parents, we often get into like yes-no questions, I think because we can't think of any other way to say it. So I'd encourage you to try to use a lot of how, or what did you think about, or tell me about. That really opens it up. So rather than saying like, how was your day? Tell me about your day. Tell me 2 things about today, whatever it is. And if you're always getting the same things, like I had recess and I had PE. Great. Tell me something you enjoyed about PE. So then you're going to go further. Other things you can do is have beads or question games on apps. If you just type in free apps, in the free ones, like free conversation questions, and there's like tons of apps that are just questions, and it's really fun to do. Like if you're waiting in a restaurant and just go around and ask the question, it's really fun. It's a fun opportunity to ask things. Even things, so besides that, there are like lots of table games that are just conversational questions that are fun. I actually really there's a bunch of apps that are for like dating questions. And it seems silly because you think like asking your kids dating questions, but they're actually really funny because they're like get to know you questions. And you think you might know your kids and know the answers. They are going to surprise you. All the time they would surprise me. And I would think like, I know your best friend. But I would ask them, like, who do you think is your closest friend right now? And, you know, it's been Maddie forever. Maddie. Christina. What happened to Maddie? I'm like, you know, you've asked, and you're like, well, what's Christina? I haven't really heard about Christina. Tell me about that. And then you'd be surprised. Kids change. Or my favorite one is, you know, so who did you sit with today at lunch? And then here, like, so tell me about sitting at lunch. Do you get to sit wherever you want? How does lunch work? We don't really know how lunch works, and sometimes it works different than others. So those kinds of questions are kind of fun. I love asking them favorites, because that changes a lot too. Their favorites, favorite movies, favorite TV shows, favorite characters, favorite meal, favorite dessert, and they love talking about it. They love talking about themselves, and it's fun hearing them talk about themselves. Highs and lows is something that is really fun to start, especially when your kids get into sort of that upper elementary age and going into the teen years. It's something that you can start either as like a new bedtime ritual, where it used to be something where you will like read and do those things together, and you're morphing out of that as they get older. Highs and lows is a great way to say, give me a high about today and a low about today. We changed it in our house from high lows to high low mo, because sometimes they were searching for a low. And I'm like, I don't want you to search for something low. If there was not something low, don't go finding something for it. So we changed it into a low mo so they could tell me something more high, like a more kind of thing. So that's what we called it. To this day, my kids still give me a high and a low mo every night, and they're 23 and 21. Which is really fun. I get to hear about their life in a quick text, which is fun. Model open-ended questions. Set up your positive expectations pre-teach. So like before, we talked about it a little bit, like before you go in the grocery store, having just that moment and be like, all right, we got this. We're going in the grocery store. We're going to hold on to the cart. We're going to practice our walking feet. We are going to get so many marbles. And when we get out, we are going to get through that checkout lane with smiling faces. It's going to be fantastic. The whole pre-teaching of what's going to happen. We're going to Aunt Martha's. We are going to not walk in the white room. We are going to stay on the hard floor. That's key at Aunt Martha's house. So some of those just pre-teaching, like with positive aspects. I'm going to be giving you marbles like crazy because you're going to do so awesome. So some of those things. Activity bags. This is one thing I want to leave you with is that if you don't have these, make them. They take some setup time, but so in your car, if you have 3 kids, I suggest you make 3 bags and you leave them in your car or you have them in your house and they're just quiet activities. So like you could just get a baggie and fill it with some Legos. Get a baggie and put some crayons in it. Have some coloring books, have some, I don't know, Play-Doh in there, have some Matchbox cars, have some books, have some, whatever you can think of. You have a Slinky, whatever it is. You get a bunch of things, you put them in the different bags, and then if you have them in your car and you happen to go to a restaurant, you can take it in with you. And then they do the stuff that's in their bag, and then when they all get done, then you can be like, okay, everybody trade bags. And then they can do those 10 activities. Then everybody trade bags. They could do those 10 activities. And then if you just keep the bag, you can keep using it at different times. If you have to watch sporting events and you've got little kids, those are great to take with you. Bringing them to church, taking them to wait at the dentist office or in the doctor's office. It's awesome. So spend a little time and get your ready. They're like, the ready bags for whatever that is, but take them in with you. And proximity works wonders. So if you're having like kids that are being sort of obnoxious to one another, just go sit between them. Don't say anything about it. You could count them if they're bothering each other. Just go sit between them. Or be like, you know what, you can sit by me. Oh, I'm going to come sit by you, honey. It's so good to see you. They'll be like, oh, Mom. I'll be like, oh, I'm just going to wiggle right in here between you because I just love you both so much. And they'll both be like, oh, geez. Mom, kind of thing. But that's just being close to someone who's sort of being a little bit of a pain at the moment, where you can reach out and sort of like rub them on the back, like, ooh, let's come right here with you. Or you can give them a little tap on the knee, kind of thing that works wonders. All right, so I think that's where we're going to stop because I think Ben wants to come up and tell you about what's going to happen next. So just know I've enjoyed the time with you guys. You can come back, watch any of the videos, and I had lots of fun. So thanks for having me, Ben.
Let's hear it for Halley.